Hi, Beth. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you.
That's awesome to hear.
It is.
I I absolutely loved French Girl. I just have to start
Oh,
this interview with
oh
that.
my God. Well,
I
that's great.
laughed, I
Then we're off to
cried.
we're off to the races. Oh, you cried? Oh my
I
God.
did at
That's
the
nice.
end.
I
It
mean,
was
I don't like you crying. I just mean it's nice that it was moved you to tears. I didn't. Yeah, that's
it
very
really.
sweet of you to say.
Um, so your writing partnership with James, you've been writing together for quite some time now, but this is your first time directing.
Well,
First off,
we've done some pilots and stuff and some short films and but this is our first feature, yeah. So we've been building up to this for a long time and we finally were able to do it. So the gods of cinema smiled on us. So we're very happy about that.
that's awesome. How does it feel to finally have gotten here?
Man, it was a long journey. This is, we wrote and conceived this, I want to say like 10, 12 years ago. And then we sort of worked on it occasionally, and then we put it in a drawer and got busy with some other stuff, and then about 5 years ago we had the chance to really sort of take it out and really look at it seriously, and we partnered with some producers, and then the rubber met the road, and then yeah, here we are like 5 years later, and so it's the end of a really long journey, and it's sort of surreal and beautiful and terrifying and sad, all the things. That's all the things.
And how did your partnership begin?
We met, so we're both from Montreal, and we met in about 2002, I think, working on a TV series called Seriously Weird, which was like a sort of not a spoof on Harry Potter, but kind of. And and then Montreal's a pretty small community for acting, like especially on the English side. And then so subsequently we got cast in a few things, and we just very quickly developed this kind of rapport and this chemistry together on screen and off. And that's where we realized as we became friends that our sort of our backstory was very similar, where we both had French Canadian mothers who married English Canadian fathers. And we were like, why is that not a movie? Like that's crazy. So it became the genesis of sort of, we wanted to make a throwback sort of fun romantic comedy, and we thought, well, what better setup than that? That's a story we both know, and we're both here on this planet because of that story. We should pay tribute to that story. So throughout the years we just would sort of work on that script, and I'm glad we took as long as we did with it, because I think it's like I think all the nuance in it really paid off, and I think the sort of time away, putting something away and coming back to it, there's like a measurable benefit to doing that. If you can stand it as a writer, it's probably the best thing you could do, because it gives you a perspective that you just can't get if you're just trying to cram something out. But yeah, so long story short, we were both actors, and then we sort of drifted into writing and now directing. Hopefully more directing down the road.
Yeah, for sure. I'm glad you used the word nuanced because that leads into my next question. The dialogue and the character dynamics are very nuanced and complicated, and it's like almost like I was watching my own family on screen.
Oh,
So,
that's great.
so
I'm
were
so
there
sorry for you.
were there elements from your families that came into the story?
Yes, I think not obviously like literally, like I don't, my dad would never jump in a ring and fight me at a fight night at a bar. But I think the spirit of and the boisterousness of the energy of the French Canadian side of my family and James's family, like that's something that we wanted to tap into. And this sort of the idea that every night could be a banquet dinner at your house, it's just part of the culture here. I mean, it's and the sort of cacophonous dialogue at the table could be incessant. If and what we really loved is that moment where we just see Zach that first night when he's thrust into the family dinner. Like I've had that experience, at other French Canadians houses when I go to their, I'm half French Canadian and half English. James is a little bit, he's half French Canadian as well, but he went to school in French and I went to school in English. So I'm a little more on the Gordon side than James, but it's just, it has the French Canadian, patois has such an intense melodic kind of quality. It's so fun to like be immersed in it. And we just love the idea of a Brooklynite just sort of thrust into that dinner. So the energy is really the thing, and sort of like the old, mammy, and the sort of like older members of the family, and I don't know. It's just that's the thing that we kind of wanted to graft on there, and the rest was like a combination of sort of friends of friends and family that we knew, and other people's families, and then our imagination. Sort of like threading in some cultural stuff. Like the reason we set it in the culinary world is just food, as I said, is such a huge part of Quebec culture. I mean, it's a part of a lot of cultures, but
Mm.
Montreal is such a foodies paradise, and French Canadians again are known for their sort of culinary kind of escapades, and um, and then the UFC stuff again. Like UFC is very popular in Quebec, and so we're like, oh my god, we got to have Junior be like a UFC nut, and then we got Georges St. Pierre to come and do a cameo. So all those things are sort of cultural touchstones that we wanted to put in there, and setting the film on a family farm. Quebec is really known for its agriculture, and so that's something else we thought, oh, that's a nice way to sort of represent. And of course, setting it in Quebec City, it's so bizarre to us that as far as we know, on a sort of an English kind of movie, it's never really been showcased as Quebec City. People sometimes go there to shoot it as Europe, but it's really like the Europe of Canada, and it's crazy. It's a city that has 400 years of history, and it's just so beautiful. There's literally a castle on the goddamn hill. Like it's crazy that we thought this is such a perfect backdrop for romantic comedy. So yeah, all those things kind of just inspired us, and we wanted to showcase Quebec in that light.
I love that. Um, I have to ask about the swan, kind of building off of your answer. Is that something one of you knew personally, or was that part of the
Oh, I'm
imagination?
friends with tons of swans. Oh my God. No, it was we had the same question going into pre-production. I mean, we wrote it, in the script, and it was, you write stuff, and you're like, whatever, this will be fine. I mean, and that's like, it's kind of funny. A lot of writers aren't directors, and so they write it and they hand it off like, you figure it out. And then we wrote it, and then we're like, oh shit, we got to figure this out. How are we going to do this? And we had a fantastic animal wrangler, and early in pre-production we sort of said, well, do you guys, are swans trainable? Like what does one do with a swan? How does one get a swan to obey a command? Because they're pretty fickle, beasts. They don't really like to be obedient. Um, but they said, no, what we're going to do is we're going to take a swanling, like, and we're going to train it from birth, and get it accustomed to doing these things. So we trained it to do, I don't know, three or four different things, like, and so this swan in the film was literally born to be in French Girl, and we had a great time. Turned out was very obedient. I mean, it was a little challenging to shoot because we were on a tight schedule, and sometimes it would have been nice to have like a few more hours to really nail it down. But I think she did fantastic, and she should be proud of her work. And she became a close friend, and we didn't actually, no animals were harmed. I can't say spoiler alert, but no animals were harmed in the making of this film. But yeah, no, it was a challenge. But and there was also, yeah, we had a lot of animals in this movie, and I would tell any aspiring directors to maybe cut the animals out of the script because they do take a lot of time to film. So be very sure if you're going to have an animal in the script, it's worth it because it takes a lot of time.
Now, were your actors as difficult to wrangle?
Yes. No, we had a dream cast. Oh my goodness. And I'm so excited for the American audiences to feast their eyes on our French Canadian cast because, man, are they, we obviously, Zach and Vanessa and Bill Fichtner and Ed Weeks, people have been entertained by them for years, and they're amazing. But I'm really excited for the Americans to get a taste of the French Canadian cast, who are powerhouses in their own right. And in Quebec are movie stars. Like, Quebec has a sort of an insular media landscape. It's almost like its own country where they have their own movie stars, and they have their own media sort of landscape and their own movies that come out. And the Quebec population is very supportive of that. And they love going to the movies and to nurture these talents. So we got to work with the best of the best in the province. And we were so fortunate that they signed on to this movie. um the cast just worked together like a dream. It was crazy. And as actors, James and I both, we have that sort of innate knowledge of what does an actor need to feel comfortable on a set. So for us, our job number one, A, was cast the right people. Like 80% of, I think, directing is casting. And so when you do that properly, like a lot of your job is done. And so beyond that, your job is to just create a safe space where people can feel like they can make mistakes, they can fall on their face. It doesn't matter. No one's judging them. We're here to have fun, to give them the latitude and to also seek out and crave their ideas for the role. Like it's their role. We give it to them when we cast them, and we want their ideas. Like James and I are collaborators just by nature of being a partnership. So from the get-go, we're always seeking, everybody's input, and the best idea wins. And for actors to get that much more emotionally invested in their role, it's important that you give them the space to say, no, I think this or I think that, and they're going to own it that much more. That was our experience as actors. We always wanted, of course, we're egomaniacs, I guess, but we want to have input in our characters, and so that's something like we always remember to foster that in pre-production through production, because it really brings A, everyone on the same page, and B, makes them more emotionally invested, in their role. And to have a guy like Zach, who is a filmmaker in his own right, it's doubly beneficial to have him as a filmmaker because, yes, he has that myopic sort of view of his character, but he also has a bird's eye view of the story. He has that ability to see the whole thing because he's a director. So he's very good at sort of pointing out things that are emotional beats that need tracking throughout the film, jokes that need tracking throughout the film. It was invaluable to have him sort of exercise that muscle with us and sort of be there in the background, especially on our feature debut. It was a nice bonus, yeah, to have that.
That's awesome. I want to go back to something you said a little bit earlier about food
Mhm.
being very important to the culture. And I've always seen food as like the lens into a culture. So I've never been to Canada at all. So
Oh my God, come! It's not warm right now, but it will be in a few months. So get up here.
so what if I were to get like a taste of the culture, like what foods would you recommend?
I mean, Montreal, well, that's sort of the thing that we want, that we sort of that we compare and contrast in the film is the difference between this sort of high octane, highfalutin food that Vanessa's character cooks, right? This kind of esoteric molecular gastronomy, which is great. And, it's cool to push the boundaries in that way where you make a strawberry taste like a tomato. And isn't that cool? And look at these mozzarella balloons. And that's fun. And it's so sort of more, it's a lot of it is performative and theatrical, but
Mhm.
really the sort of the hometown Montreal vibe is a lot more rustic. And, you're talking about like taking rustic recipes and infusing like a little spin on them. I mean, uh, like a lobster spaghetti, or like these big Côte de Boeuf steaks, the tomahawk steaks, like really hearty. I mean, oysters are a big part of Montreal culture. Um, God, what else? There's just God, I don't even. I'm just going through menus in my head now. It was really what was really fun. It was like all the eating out that we did on this movie for prep.
It's
But it was a lot of research that we had to do. But yeah, it's that rustic food that feels like homemade, but it has just like an extra twist to it. Like bone marrow stuff and like uh, moose burgers and things that are like very like, yeah, just hearty, delicious food that feels homemade, but yeah, it's soul food. It's like northern soul food in a way, if that makes sense. Yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
it does.
Like a nice maple glazed salmon. You can't go wrong. It's delish.
Oh, that sounds good.
Yeah, it's really good.
So if I were to visit Quebec City, what would be the first restaurant or cafe or wherever that I should try?
Oh man. Um I have it. Sorry, I always forget the name of it. Legende. I would go to Legende. La Legende? La Legende. Legend, basically, it's called. It's amazing. Really fun experience, beautiful restaurant. But there's so many in Quebec City. There's so many. We went to like tons. Excuse me. Uh, even the restaurants, there's two restaurants I think in the Chateau Frontenac, and those are delicious. The Chateau Frontenac is a must stop destination, and obviously it's the castle on the hill in Quebec, and you should definitely go check it out. The whole city though, it's small, but it's so, I mean, it's medieval. It's crazy. Like the history in that city, the cobblestone streets, and it's so dramatic too because it's on a hill. It's like on a sort of mountain. So it's very steep and these beautiful little winding streets that you could just walk in for hours. Every little restaurant has its own little unique kind of menu, and yeah, you it's a lovely place to go. It really is a lovely place to go. And also a lot of sort of senior citizen tourists go there, and which is great. I mean, they're retired and they want a tour, and it's a great cruising destination. But that what that also means is at night it gets really quiet. So it's a great city to shoot a car chase in because there's no one around at night. And the city is extremely accommodating in that regard. Like, yeah, for sure, here's all the permits, and they were very helpful. It was great. But yeah, it's a fun town.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I have a few places to go now. So thank you.
Yeah, of course.
Um, I think I am just about out of time, but before I let you go, is there anything else you'd like to add about French Girl?
I just hope people I just hope people I hope people see it because our whole thing was we just want to make people laugh and put a smile on their face. I think the world is a little intense right now. And unfortunately these movies get made less and less these days because, comedy is not a sexy global export for these massive media companies, which I think is just the most tragic thing that, nobody really wants to pay for us to laugh anymore, which I think is really sad, to be honest, existentially. So my hope is that this film gets passed around and that it puts a smile on people's faces because I think we could all use that right now. That's our dream.
For sure,
Yeah.
for sure. Well, like I said, I loved it. I laughed. I did cry at the end, but it was happy tears. So
Yes, happy tears. Well, dream come true then. I'm glad you enjoyed it and I'm glad it was moving and yeah, I really appreciate you watching it and taking the time.
of course, of course. Thank you for making it, and I can't wait to see what both you and James do next.
Something, I hope. Thanks a lot, Beth. Appreciate it.